Hello everyone and welcome to a fresh discussion on PowerPoint presentation. This is part 2 of out of 3 lectures on PowerPoint presentations. So, in this particular one we are going to discuss about body language. In the previous lecture I have very briefly touched about body language, but I thought that we require probably more discussion on this. And it is very important, especially for beginners, to learn this thing that they should not use gestures which goes negative or which shows the lack of confidence during the presentations. So, why this is required, as you know that sometimes the group of people in the room, when they are there, they can't actually hear the presenter's voice, but they want to hear that the person who seems to be speaking clearly and is making eye contact with various people in the room. These are the conditions, these are the things which we can consider under this body language, so that one should be speaking clearly all the time, making eye contact with the audience and various people, different people within the hall or room. The difficulty comes when you are having in a large hall and there is a complete dark in the large hall, and then it becomes a little challenging to have a eye contact with the people who are sitting in almost in the dark. So, the tendency of presenter is generally looking always the front rows where some light is already there. Anyway, so these are the few points one should remember. Another thing is that one should emphasize points using appropriate gestures, but too much body language gestures are also not good. And the body language also indicate whether the person who is speaking having confidence or not. For example, I can give one example that various people, when they do not have confidence during the presentation, then they hold the podium very strongly and they do not move at all. In this particular setup, we can't move here and there. So, I am most of the time in front of camera, but in normal speaking or presentations in conferences or meetings, one can move a few steps here and there. By this movement you can also check that whether the audience is following your movements or not, but too much movements are also not good. Another important thing which I have observed, that many people while speaking they will put their hands in the pockets of either coat or jacket or trouser, which again shows that lack of confidence. So, such things should not happen while making an impactful presentation, because directly you are conveying to the audience that you do not have the confidence of speaking there. So, there are many small things which we consider under this body language. Further, imagine that you are being watched or you are watching under similar circumstances, and when a presenter is making such kind of mistakes or gestures like putting hands and not moving or moving too fast, then that immediately what you would feel that probably he is nervous, he does not have confidence and so on. So, sometimes they will avoid direct contact and their hands in their pockets, as I have just mentioned. They might be shifting their weights uncomfortably and leanings particularly on some part of table or other things, whatever the props they are having in front of them, and generally they are unenthusiastic of their topic. And if a person, see, suppose a person who is speaking or trying to convey a point or seeking a funds for a project, and if he does not have the full control of the audience or enthusiasm, then you can think that what kind of results he can have. So, all these things one has to remember, and the best learning about this body language is watching the others. So, when you watch others, the things which you are feeling bad or awkward, you should not do it in your presentation. One of the part of body language is the hand gestures. So, hands can be used, but I have observed many people, like for example, they will keep using like this, or with too much movement of the hand. They will distract the audience, and audience, instead of listening the point which the speaker is trying to convey, will get distracted and will start focusing on their hand gestures. So that is again one should be avoiding all the time. And further, one should not indulge in the grand display of hand waving, and again this can be destructive. And sometimes if too much hand being waved, then it looks comical as well. Many times if you observe the TV debates, and some people will will show too many gestures by hand, they show that they are having a very bad confidence, and probably they do not have good points to convey, and therefore using hands and creating distraction for their own audience. Using hands in different ways so that there is no one style, and this is another way of doing that thing. But the best thing is that one should use optimum hand gestures. The best thing, this is what I find, and sometimes we have to explain, so we can definitely use hand gestures, but balance has to be there. If no movement of hands, that also shows lack of confidence, and if too much movements of hands, that also shows that person is probably nervous and unable to convey his points. That is why he is trying to convey the points through hands. So it is a both way, too much on any side is anyway very bad. Now face gesture, a happy smiling face showing interest, which will create interest also in the audience, or you may gain attention of the audience. So that is another thing, and also such expressions would really attract the whoever is sitting in the audience, and also shows that the confidence which you are having, because a person who is nervous cannot smile. So this is another thing important. Some people have got the gesture of whole body movements. Now that is sometimes not good, or most of the time it is not good, that how the full body gestures, which includes that how you stand. So as discussing in the previous lecture, that if I know what is the setup in a conference room or conference hall or in a meeting room, then I should go at least visit once and make ourselves familiar, and also decide that where I would be standing. And from that point should I be showing most of the time my face or front part of my body or back of my body, because that is also very bad if I keep showing my back to the audience. So this orientation, body orientation, is equally important while making a presentation, and basically I am talking about whole body, and one should not move too much. That dance kind of thing should not be there at all, otherwise the audience will get distracted and you may lose the point also. So, but another important thing, that leaning against something or sitting on the edge of a table which is in front, or sitting on a chair while speaking, these are not good body gestures also. When you are sitting on a chair, you go and sit on a chair and continue speaking, that clearly shows that you are showing the tiredness and your disinterest, and thus in a reciprocal way the audience will also show in the same manner. So gestures, whole body gestures, the purpose here that you should draw the full attention of the audience, and also one should not exaggerate things by these gestures. Now what is to be avoided in presentation? So one should not avoid the audience or facing the audience. So you might find that especially the beginners, when they are going for a large conference or meeting or going to do the presentation, they would rather look towards the screen or board rather than the audience, and that is a clear sign of lack of confidence. And of course one should not speak to the board or screen, one should speak to the audience. That is very, very important here. Now reading a slide is also not a good practice. So the best thing how one can avoid a reading, not to read the slides, is prepare yourself very well, so that you remember everything, whatever the content in the slides, and you start just picking the points from the slide and speaking. And because in such presentations, I am talking about say PowerPoint presentations, which requires that you communicate verbally with the audience, taking the help of the slides. It should not be the other way around, that you are speaking to the board and not to the audience, and basically what end of the day it would be that you are losing the interest of the audience. So basically the goal of the presenter is to capture and hold the audience attention, and this is what it is done. See, as one can think that there are two things. One is making a good presentation and having a good content in your PowerPoint presentation. Now for a impactful presentation, both are required. That is minimum. One should have definitely a good content in his slides, and secondly, in a good way he is able to communicate, and that the total effort would be considered as an impactful presentation. Otherwise one may lose the interest of the audience, and this loss cannot be recovered. But because in a large conferences or in a project proposal presentations or for jobs or any other places, if you are unable to communicate the point, then you are immediately losing the chances of getting selection or funding or other things. Let me give you few examples here from my own experiences. Once two students had even the same name, first name were the same, and the first person who made a good work could do good work but couldn't make good presentation, and whereas the other person who could not do or did not do good work but made a very impactful presentation. And then evaluation board wanted to give more weightage or more marks to the second person who could make a good presentation rather than a person who did a good work, because they can only assess what it is being presented. But I had to play some moderation role because both were my students, and I knew that the first one has done really hard work, but somehow he could not make good presentation. So the best thing which is required from our side is to have a good work and good presentation. That will really earn the highest marks or highest attention of the audience. And many times these are the chances once in a life, and you might lose even a job or a possibility of a job if you are unable to make good presentations. Even for jobs, I have seen people that if you go through their CV, publications and their research experiences, and they are good on papers, but when they are asked to make presentation on some very basic subjects, then they are unable to do it. So at least such people cannot be selected for teaching or research purposes, but they can go elsewhere. So what I am trying to say, that both things are important, both things are required, then only it becomes a very good presenter, orator and worker also. So content has to be equally important as well as the presentation part. So effective presentation, what are the final points here? The fonts which we have already discussed in the first part, that the one should have a fonts which does not change, its thickness does not change within the character length, and also the size at least 24 or 28, because if you keep, say, sometimes I have observed or several times I have observed that they are keeping point size 12 or 16 or 18. That means they are keeping too much text in their slides, and that means the audience is unable to see their points or whatever written in the slides. So if you keep a large font, that means you would have a less text in the slide, and the entire audience will be able to see that one. So that is another purpose of keeping large fonts, rather than using small fonts and cluttering your slides with the text. that is not a good practice at all. In many such a project evaluation or research evaluation in different institutes, I have found, and some at places I have also told their higher ups or director that their young scientists need a training on how to make good impactful presentations. But at the same time I communicated to them that your scientists, researchers are doing good work, but their presentation is not up to the mark. And these are small things. If one is told that these are the mistakes he or she might be committing, then the corrections can be made accordingly, and the same work, if it is presented with improved communication skills, I am sure that it will create a long lasting impact in the audience. And another important thing is that generally one should not change the fonts from one slide to another. See, neither like background, neither size and other thing. Why? Very simple reason is that if you keep changing the font types or font style and the size, then the audience get distracted. So, the same font of the almost same font size should be used throughout your PowerPoint presentation or in all slides. And you know that headings can be also the same if according to content, of course, but what I am trying to say that each slide should not have a different heading, because if you have a different headings and if the subject is not different, then again is a point of distraction. So, that can also be avoided. And if there is a heading or a caption for the slide, or title rather than not caption but title for the slide, then one should use more larger font, maybe the bold and other thing. This adding slide number is also sometimes very helpful, not only to the speaker but the audience also. So, one can definitely add the slide number, and because if I am keeping the time of a presenter, suppose I am chairman of a session in an international or national conference, and I know that this person is about to end his presentation or going to complete his presentation, then I would not, if one or two slides are left, then I would not say anything that is please stop or please complete, because I know that he is anyway going to end. So, this adding a slide number is also very good practice and a good indication to the audience also. Sometimes we have to use larger fonts, like here the final guidelines for effective PowerPoint presentation. This is larger font to emphasize certain things, and maybe bold, color, style, all these things are there, but do not change the font, keep font all the time same. I have to speak or I have to put a say definition, or I would say put a sentence in my slide, then it should not be very long. Otherwise, it creates a distraction, or the audience may not be able to fully understand. So, if it is possible, use small points or sentences. So, avoid long sentences, avoid abbreviation and acronyms. Why? Because in the audience some people might not be knowing the abbreviation. For example, if I use an abbreviation from my own domain, that is AVHRR. Now, the person who has never heard AVHRR will start thinking of that and will get distraction from my presentation, and for a few seconds or few minutes he will start thinking what is AVHRR. It is the best thing is that at least once, the first time when abbreviation has to be used in future slides, first time with full form the abbreviation should be shown, and then later on you can definitely use abbreviation, or during the presentation you can explain that what is AVHRR, and then later on you can keep using AVHRR. No, there will not be any problem. But just not explaining what is AVHRR and keep repeating AVHRR will really distract the audience. Another small things like limit the punctuation marks and other things are also there, because they are indicating something, and one has to be little careful about using. And again, small sentences, small lines maybe 6 to 8 birds, but this is not fixed, it is as per the requirements. Bullets can also be used and not very big size bullets, not very small size bullets like here which you are seeing, medium size or default bullets are there. Many times in such softwares like PowerPoint, many times the default values are quite good, except for the font which I find most of the time in default is Times Roman, but otherwise many default values are quite good. So, one should rely on that without any thinking. Background, again when we discuss in the previous lecture about the background, a very fancy background of having a background of a car or something or a natural scene, and each slide you are having different background, it is all going towards the distraction of the audience. So, one should definitely avoid, keep as simple as possible, because you want to communicate your point, you do not want to show the skills of how good you are on the graphics. That is not the purpose of your presentation. So, use as simple as possible, but a good content and good way of making presentation. For example, sometimes you do not have to keep repeating the elements like page number in the same location, or so whenever you are doing it, like slide number should come all the time on the same location, and similarly page number, other things should come, or references like here the references all are coming on one side. So, they will not distract the audience, but whenever they want to refer, definitely they can see and do it. Now, this design and graphical images, design templates can be used, but please avoid very fancy design templates. Sometimes organizations are having their own templates, and if it is mandatory, use them. If it is not, then you should make a template which should be very simple. Use standardized position, colors, styles, fonts, etc. And keep all the time the most required necessary information in the slides. Do not clutter your slides like your maps or figures. Similarly, the slides should not be cluttered with information, and sufficient information should be provided, as mentioned about abbreviation. So, first time an abbreviation is being used, full form should also be shown there, or you must tell to the audience that this is what the meaning is. And the content should be self evident, that means it should be self contained also, not only self evident, but self contained, that I am showing a figure or a map, it is complete by itself. So, the audience does not have to see here and there, they will get every information related with the slide or point or overall my presentation with that thing. Again, using too many colors is also distracting to the audience, and again too many slides will also not good. So, if which we have already discussed in the previous discussion, that if half an hour are given, keep maximum 30 slides or 25 slides. Sometimes if you know, since you have practiced or rehearsed, that point will also come in near future in our discussion about rehearsal. But anyway, so if I bring this point little early, that if you rehearse with your colleagues, friends or students, you would know that how much time is required to explain each and every slide. So, sometimes in classrooms I have found that even 15 slides are more than enough for a 50 minutes lecture. And like here in this setup, we do not have any person who is sitting in front of me except the camera. So, since there are no other impressions and other things, so in such setups I can post more text or more slides. But when we are having real audience, then sometimes too many slides are also not good. And this background part we have already discussed, that it should be consistent. Subtle means it should not have too many colors, too many graphics or too many scenery either, and the transitions and other things should be very simple. Bullets should always be used wherever possible, and the graphical rule at the top of all pages in multi-document. What I am trying to say here that while making these slides, one should keep this thing in mind about the design, and these the graphical rules should be kept in mind while preparing such slides. Very small images, very small figures in a one slide are very bad practice. Let me give you one example from my own experience. I was sitting in one of the expert committee, and one of my own colleagues went for presentation, and in one slide he has about 12 small figures and trying to convey to the audience what he has done and what he is going to do it in that research project. And the entire 10-15 minutes which he had, each slide had lot of information, lot of figures, and nothing were visible to the audience very clearly, because lot of information, I would say multiple pages informations have been put in just few slides, and that went in a completely wrong way. And then later on during discussion, the chairman asked that has anybody understood what he was trying to say through his presentation, and since he was my colleague, so I had to say to the entire committee that I know this he is a very good researcher, but somehow he could not make a good presentation. I on behalf of this committee and chairman, I will definitely discuss with him and will request him to improve his slides for future presentations, and he did, and next time he never had any problem. So, once somebody has told, or one can do in a reverse way, that before going for final presentation, as I have been suggesting throughout the discussion under this technical communication course, that for any final or big presentations, please discuss or please show or make a presentation in front of your colleagues, friends, students, and ask them honest feedback, and I am sure they will give all kinds of feedback if they are having their own experiences, or if they do not find interesting or interest in your presentation, they should tell about these things. So, if I have to present too many figures or images, then I should prioritize these things, and rather than putting too many figures, as just I mentioned the incident which has happened. Small sizes figures and images should be definitely avoided, and if I have to bring for certain to communicate certain things, I have to bring several, then I should use proper border and other things, as we have discussed while discussing the maps or figures, how they should be designed. These images or figures can be arranged vertically or horizontally, but they should be numbered properly. Again, the audience should not deviate or should not lose attention while searching that what is the sequence, whether it is horizontally 1, 2, 3 or vertically 1, 2, 3. So, it is always better to put numbers so that he would follow. Suppose somebody is trying to change, so changes maybe with the time or with the experiments or other things, then you should write some sequence also there. These are small things, but they matters a lot really. So, clean design, uncluttered always is good. Leave a space between text and graphics, that is also very much required. And whenever we are using figures or images, the quality should be maintained. Good quality figures only should be presented, otherwise it creates a wrong impression. Maybe sometimes we have to use a lot of images or figures. So, basically there is no rule of how many. I can make presentations without using much text and only through the figures, but too much figures and after figures and no other things are there, that can also be distracting. So, anything is too much is always should be avoided. If I have to repeat a figure on an image, then the best thing is I should not go back through the slides, rather than I can repeat the same figure again, because I am referring to that figure. So, that will also make a good impression that the point which you wanted to discuss with a particular figure, that has already gone, and now again you want to bring that reference. So, the best thing is just keep again repeat, or because this will create because you will be able to communicate your point very convincingly to the audience. And numbers, as I have said already, that these images, figures should have numbers. If there are many in a slide, then one should have these things are there. If I want to emphasize one particular image or one particular figure, then I should have that kind of arrangement by using either color or some other style in the change, or a clip art or other thing by which I can make all the time a good emphasis on certain figures or other things are there. Now, this is a always required, and that is why I have been repeatedly saying, before going for a final PowerPoint presentation to a large audience or a committee or a selection board, if opportunities are available, please go visit the setup, run your PowerPoint presentation, check with the screen, projection screen, and see that how your presentation is coming. Because if you are having images and figures, when they are projected, there will be some deterioration in the quality. Whether that deterioration is not causing any distraction in the audience or not, that is what we wanted to check here. So, if possible, because in all cases it is not possible. So, if it is not possible in the same setup or same audience, same hall, then in maybe other place with the same kind of setup, one should try to project, rather than just seeing in your screen laptop and just going for final presentation through these LCD projectors. So, at least once in actual hall or actual meeting room, if it is not possible, do it elsewhere and check how your slides are coming, how your figures and images are coming when they are projected. And one should not have two contrasting images, two contrasting figures. We have already discussed this point, that colors should be used very judiciously, so that they do not distract the audience. Like one should not use too many colors, and for one screen maybe one simple color, or my suggestion that for entire PowerPoint presentation just keep the same color scheme, and then that will not deviate your audience or attention of the audience. So, this is very important thing. Do not keep too many colors, too many changes in your slides, except the content, because this is what you are trying to communicate to the audience, rather than trying to distract them through colors, fonts, animations, and when one slide goes another comes, appearance, these things are not good. So, general presentation, plan carefully. When you are going for a presentation, any kind of presentation, one knows that why he is going for presentation, for definitely some serious work. So, plan carefully, and do not go in blank, or do your research, and that research also includes about the content first, and then research about what is the setup and other things. And one should also know your audience. This is another very important thing for a impactful presenter or a person. So, from my own experience I can say, whenever I am called for some special lectures or presentations to audience, then I always ask the organizers beforehand that who is going to be my audience, whether school children, which I have also done to 9th, 11th, 12th, all these classes students I have done it, or for the expert group. So, if I know the audience, then I would present accordingly. So, if I know that the audience does not have the background on the topic or subject which I am going to speak, then my overall presentation should be very simple, and one should build up initially with the small points, bringing at the early stages and trying to guide the audience according to your point. That is the good practice, rather than not knowing before going who is going to be the audience, and you keep if a school children and you start giving too many jargons questions, then it may not work at all. And you know, the young school children, and they will start talking or playing, and all kinds of things can happen. So one should know the audience before going, or before even preparing a PowerPoint presentation, because that has to be very simple, very convincing, and minimum distracting thing. And if I know that this the PowerPoint presentation I am going to make for some selection committee for myself, then accordingly I should do it. Of course, the time management is always very much required, and whenever you are speaking, speak comfortably with pleasure and with confidence, and of course these things will come once they are there. You would also speak very clearly as well. And this is another very important thing. Might have, it has sometimes even has happened with me, but initial stage of my career, sometimes I have observed that the spelling or grammar, mainly the spelling part, there are some mistakes. While making presentation, I realized I don't know how audience have realized or not, and what kind of impression they carried. Nowadays, you know that there are spell checkers are also there, but that doesn't mean that you know, the spell checker is really checking the entire sentence or meaning of the sentence. In earlier, one of the earlier discussions or lectures, I have told that instead of telling that you know, snacks are also served, the person wrote snakes. So both spellings are correct, and therefore the computer or spell checker or grammar will not check that one, or will not highlight, will not make in red color. So therefore that effort or that work we have to do it, but what we can do that avoid or should not be spelling mistakes or grammar also. The good practice impactful presentation is that bring points one by one in bullet form, and the presenter should speak, and rather than just reading the entire thing, and that is not good at all. So for effective presentation, I find using bullets, simple bullets, not very fancy again, and trying to keep all the time attention of the audience alive, and trying to guide through my presentation. That is what I find. Like for changing of slides, I find some people don't use devices like these, as we have already discussed in the previous lecture, and then they have moved to some place, then they will come back again, and through keyboard or mouse they will go for the next slide, or they will take help of a person and say next slide, next slide. This is all part of distraction, and that should not be there, that should be completely avoided. As said earlier, have full control during that time. If half an hour given, full control over the audience, full control over the system by yourself. That is what a good impactful presentation demands. If you are depending on just for half an hour, you are depending on somebody or moving every time for every slide towards the keyboard or mouse, it is not good at all. So best thing, invest some money, keep such devices with you all the time whenever you are going for presentation, and use very effectively to make a impactful presentation. You know, the position, because all these things will come once you are familiar with the setup. So the monitor or the screen or projection screen, if they are arranged, because in big conferences sometimes there are 4 or 5 screens are there all around the hall, and that becomes a little challenging for a beginner. So the best thing is to, you can focus, you can keep one screen in your mind which is covering almost the entire audience, and keep that thing, or sometimes you can also move your eyes from one screen to another. But if there is only one projection screen, then do not look all the time towards the screen, rather you should look towards the audience. Another important thing is that whenever you are going to make presentation, then one should just display the names of the contributors and the name of the institute, agency or whoever the company is there, because it takes time, you are wasting your time. So, this acknowledgement slide should not be read at all, it should be just displayed, and if it is very important to acknowledge somebody's contribution, you can very briefly tell, but do not read, because reading is always distractant to the audience. So, you just display the name and you can just tell the important person. A long list is also not required in acknowledgement slide. Consider using a collage of photo, your collaboration in their natural settings for this purpose. And there are various ways to acknowledge these things are, but keep these things also very simple. Too many names in one acknowledgement slide and the details about the institute, other things is not required. If a project has been sponsored by some sponsoring agency, just give their names. If a study has been supported by few people, then in the beginning slide you can keep, but you need not to read. But even if you have to read, but then only 2-3 names should be read. Self assessment for everyone. Even today when I make a presentation, important presentation to large audience or to committee or other things, I do this self checking, may not be on paper, but in our mind, that did I introduce myself to the audience, but very briefly it has to be done. Don't read or don't narrate your CV. Nobody is ready to listen, and if you have been invited for some lecture, a special lecture, or as a chairman or a keynote speaker, then you have been already introduced. So, do not waste time. Time is important. Time is equally important in any effective presentation. So, do not waste too much time for introducing yourself, but if nobody has introduced, very briefly you can tell your name, your organization, and just go for the presentation. It will take only 10 seconds or 5 seconds and go for for presentation itself. You can also raise a questions that did you aim to arouse the interest of your audience? Have you been successful of this one? While preparing slides also you can go through this checklist, but of course after the presentation, because that is not going to be your last presentation, probably that is the first in your life or in your career. So, if we keep going through these self assessment checklists, and definitely in next presentation I would be making a more better or improved presentation, and likewise one can be really near perfect in their presentation. You can also ask a question that did I begin with a clear introduction of topic and in the overview of what you are going to cover. Some students show the content. The first is the banner slide, then they will say this is my menu card of content. I find it is a wastage of time. Very briefly you should introduce the title or topic of your presentation, and that is it. You need not to show the entire content starting from introduction or this thing and then discussion, conclusions and references. Basically you are losing time, and one should not think or resort to such practice. Where your ideas presented clearly with the logical flow from one point to the next. This one can also ask that the point which I am trying to convey, whether I was able to do it or not. Did I conclude or by summing what you have wanted to communicate? So, in the last you can definitely sum up the things, and that is a part of good presentation or impactful presentation. What I am trying to say here is that your presentation abruptly should not stop. You should sum up and then or conclude and then stop, and that is a cap up kind of thing has to be there, but it can only be done once you are within the time limit given to you. And you can also raise a question, was my visual aids presented clearly or not, that also. So, in future if I find that my slides were not good, in future I will try to improve. There are few more points which we can go through these checklists, that did I have good control over the material or the setup in the correct order or in the slides in the correct order, and again did I present in the right amount of the facts and figures. And maybe after the presentation or even before presentation, once I have finished the presentation from my side, I can raise this question to myself. So I can assess that whether the audience have understood or not. And when you are having a live audience, and the expression of the faces tells lot of things, and one can take clues from these things also. And like in normal classes, when I am trying to explain certain definition or certain point, and I find that students faces are near blank, then I will try to repeat the same thing. But in normal classes I am having sufficient time to do it, or repeating the same thing, or making it simple so that they can understand. But in a very formal PowerPoint presentations in conference or elsewhere, we do not have much time to do all these things. So the best thing, we can communicate very well with our slides only. Did I look and sound interesting and enthusiastic to student? This I can raise to myself after the presentation, and if I find no, then I can try to improve in the next presentation. Timing always has to be perfect, and provide maybe later on, not be in the beginning, the hands out to the audience. Because many people, if your talk has been very interesting, you have made a very good innovative work, and then in the audience many people will ask, can you share your slides, or can you give the handouts to the audience? So one should be always prepared. And now we are coming to the end of this discussion, that we can also raise a question, did I take up a good position during your presentation? That means whether I was located on the stage or in front of the audience correctly or not. These things, if you after each and every presentation, if we go through, then I am telling you this will improve further and further, and one day one will be able to do a good perfect presentation. And many times nowadays recordings are also available, so one can look back the recordings and can see that what kind of mistakes he has committed, whether voice was not clear or slides were not clear to audience, and in future presentations there. And finally, did I allow time for questions and invited the audience to make comments? This is very, very important, because on many occasions this you do not have to do it, but in certain occasions we have to do it, because sometimes the audience might be having questions, but if I have not allowed because of time constraint, then it is just one way of communication, and it is not part of a good effective presentation. So definitely I should have given sufficient time for questions and comments and feedback from the audience, because if I have done some research and I have gone to a conference, made a presentation, among the audience there will be some people who are exactly working almost in the same field, and they will be able to raise some certain questions if the time is permitted, and that feedback will help me to improve my work further. So that is the main purpose of going to the conferences. And if we have not managed the time and did not leave much time for questions or comments, then that is going to be very bad. So with this I end this discussion, and in the last that is the last PowerPoint presentation, the third part, we will be discussing further more important points there. Thank you very much. Namaskar.